rant and rant on television for 6 hours a day, and therefore I'm questioning that therefore. You're jumping to that conclusion. What is the basis for concluding that this proves that it has widespread support? No. In fact, you could argue to the contrary. You could argue, argue to the contrary. The reason why you have to do it for 6 hours is precisely because it has so little support that you have to, in fact, actually give a much higher dose of it. It's like British India mein, the view was that the natives have no science at all. इनको साला science के बारे में कुछ पता ही नहीं है. So, in fact, what we found out through 50 years of detailed study of the curriculum, that the science curriculum in India in the 19th century was much heavier than it was back in England. Which may be one reason, by the way, that science then persisted on in the Indian curriculum later on. Because the idea was these people are completely opposed to the scientific mindset at all. So you have to give them a much heavier dose of it. I'm not saying, by the way, that that is necessarily, but I'm just giving you an analogy. That you have to really think about what this establishes, the fact that this guy is, got some kind of 6 hours on television, okay, people listen to it. But I think that one would have to do a lot more legwork to be able to show how that really translates into...
देखिए मैं इस पॉइंट से मतलब आ रहा था, एंड अगेन यू नो थिंग्स फ्रॉम मच डीपर पर्सपेक्टिव. इसके मैं फॉर एग्जांपल मेरे स्टूडेंट्स, टन्स ऑफ माय स्टूडेंट्स हैव फॉरवर्डेड दिस वेबसाइट टू मी.
बट आप मेरा पॉइंट एस्टैब्लिश कर रहे हैं ना, आपके स्टूडेंट्स हैं वो भाई. That's not a reflection on you.
नहीं, that is a reflection.
That's a reflection on.
I'm just proposing कि maybe he's on 6 hours on television because people wants to listen to him. He feeds their hatred.
No, the very fact that they're passing on this website, this is already an internet savvy, which is already, by the way, even now, a relatively small sample within the Pakistani context.
Fine.
ये भी आप मानना पड़ेगा आपको.
Fine, लेकिन he is warmly received. That's all I'm saying.
देखिए, I have encountered that phenomenon for 15 years. One of the first articles I published, I don't know, Robin might have seen it, it's in the history of history, maybe he has, was on the use of the internet to write Hindutva histories. The right was much more active in doing that. मुझे daily email आते हैं, daily, from some guy, उसने internet पे सारा कुछ पढ़ लिया, या the biggest Holocaust ever perpetrated in world history was what? Guess what? आप बताइए. You think it's the Holocaust in Germany? No, not if you're
still going on in Darfur in Pakistan.
No. This is 100 million Hindus killed by Muslims. 100 million. ये रोज आता है मुझे ईमेल यार. ये कहाँ से? और ये सब पढ़े लिखे. These guys are all PhDs in physics and computer science and biotechnology.
So why are these ideas appealing to these?
They are appealing for lots of reasons. It has to do with this particular split that I mentioned to you between religion as faith and religion as ideology. B, it has to do
religious politics.
Okay, it has to do with recuperating a sense of history, right? And the fact that you start thinking predominantly in the language of history at all. अब जैसे बाबरी मस्जिद है का किस्सा जो था, बाबरी मस्जिद टूटा, भाई अगर 20 साल पहले बना होता तो बात अलग होती. But this masjid was allowed to stand for 450 years. तो बीच में क्यों नहीं हंगामा मचा? If it was built in 1526, so why is it that only in 1980s Hindus started experiencing the hurt? कि भी यार ये जो मस्जिद है, ये this is a sign of our oppression.
खिड़की से कोई बंदा देख रहा है.
ठीक है ना? हाँ? This is a sign of our oppression, right? तो जो पहले 400 साल पहले जो हिंदू थे वो सो रहे थे.
सब सो रहे हैं.
हाँ, but सो रहे हैं. So that kind of sleep may be good. You see, that's what I'm saying. You can't. You see this idea of awakening हो रही है.
Awakening.
Not all forms of awakening.
I'll give it a different term.
Are instrumental. What's happening here is precisely a sense also of the wrongs that have been committed against you. ये जो Huntington का जो thesis है, this is not out of thin air. I mean, he's a loony in his own way. That's a different matter. But this fracture between Islam and Christianity, for example, okay, why has this become so prominent again in the discourse? You know, right? Why has it become? I mean, you go through a period of crusades, right? And then you essentially, in the 20th century, then in the last 2-3 decades, this question starts to resurface again. Where was it in the 19th century? Where was it in the 18th century? Your historical forces.
उसका जवाब मैं ये दूंगा आपको।
निकाल सकते हैं।
नहीं, उसका जवाब ये है कि देखिए, बेसिक चीज़ है कि है ह्यूमन नेचर, which is common to any religion, every religion. उस ह्यूमन नेचर, जिस कौम के पास भी स्ट्रेंथ आई है, उसने दूसरे लोगों को एक्सप्लॉइट किया है, उनको मारा है। उनको जब रोमन्स टॉप पे थे तो उन्होंने दुनिया जहान के कत्लेआम किए। चंगेज, सुनिए मेरी बात पूरी सुन लीजिए। जब चंगेज खान था उसने तबाही की। जब ऑटोमन एम्पायर था तो 2 बंदे भेजता था हॉर्स राइडर ऑल द वे अप टू हॉलैंड, क्योंकि वो बहुत ठंडी जगह थी। वो कहते हैं यहाँ फौज भेजना कोई फायदा नहीं है, सिर्फ 2 बंदे भेजता था। तुम्हें अपनी फौज, तुम्हें अपनी बादशाह चाहिए तो हमें 2 दिन के बाद जाएंगे तो हमें इतना सोना और इतना चांदी चाहिए। तो लोगों से जमा करके वो उनको देता था कि ये ले जाओ यार, हमारी जान छोड़ो। तो दैट वाज टेरर। ऑटोमन एम्पायर था। सिमिलरली जो भी एम्पायर ऊपर आता है वो एक्सप्लॉइट करता है लोगों को, और वो जुल्म भी करता है, वो मारता भी, हॉलोकॉस्ट भी करता है, सब कुछ करता है। अब बात यह है कि अब क्यों हो रहा है? अब इसलिए हो रहा है कि जो लोग इस किस्म की सोच रखते हैं, जब वो पब्लिक को मोबिलाइज करना चाहते हैं तो डिग अप दोज हिस्ट्री लेयर्स, वो ऊपर की लेयर हटा के नीचे डिग करते हैं और कहते हैं देखो तुम्हारे साथ ये जुल्म हुआ था, तुम्हारे परदादा को फलाने के सामने बंदा जो रहता है उसके परदादा ने मारा था, इसलिए अब तुम जाके उसको मारो। तो दिस इज व्हाट इट इज हैपनिंग इन इंडिया।
There's a fundamental problem with arguing this. You see, if you argue this, then there's absolutely no hope for the history of humankind, because all that means is the rule of the jungle. आप यही कह रहे हैं
तो रियलिटी तो यही
नहीं, रियलिटी कैसे है ना? बट अगर रियलिटी है तो फिर बात करने की
रूल ऑफ द पावरफुल, चाहे वो इस तरह से एक्सप्लॉइट कर,
आप पियो और जब मौका मिले तो साले किसी को
मौका मिले, अभी
बात करने का
बात करने का
For example, the Chinese had the most powerful navy in the world in the 15th century.
But they never invaded people.
They withdrew. Why did they do it?
अच्छा,
It's important to ask these questions.
अच्छा, तो
Why
उसकी क्या
did
वजह?
Japan give up the sword? There's a wonderful book by Noel Perrin. It's called Why Japan Gave Up the Sword. Why did it give up? You see this idea that if you have power, you will always use it.
अच्छा, okay,
This is an axiom that comes from statecraft in the West. And it goes back to, in fact, the time of Thucydides. एक किताब मैं recommend करूँगा, because that's the beginning of all of this here, this kind of thing. It's called The History of the Peloponnesian War. It's okay by Thucydides, written in the 5th century BC. So this is about the period when Athens and Sparta were competing for supremacy in the Peloponnesian world, you know, in the Greek world, if I may put it this way. So there's this wonderful chapter there where the Athenians, they basically take control of a little island called Milos. ये जो बुश का जो व्यू है ना, either you're with me or you're against me. This is there in the 5th century BC, because the Athenian view was, if you don't support us, that means you're supporting the Spartans and therefore you're an enemy. सीधी बात है. That's their view, as Thucydides presents it. So जो Milos actually is neutral in the conflict, but they don't accept the idea कि neutrality is possible. कोई neutral नहीं हो सकता.
Okay, fine.
So they go to this island, they take over this island. There is this dialogue. It's called the Melian dialogue. Melian dialogue it's called. 3 page का है, wonderful dialogue, because वो plead करते हैं. The Athenians basically give the view कि might is right.